I'm sorry, the lawyer said, staring down at the papers my father had brought with him. But this can't be right. My father, Richard Ellis, smiled like the room already belonged to him. Then read it again. 16 years had passed since he cut me off at 14 and left me on Aunt Vivian's porch with one duffel bag. 16 years since he told everyone I was unstable, ungrateful, too difficult for decent parents to raise. Now he stood at Vivian's while reading in a tailored gray suit, tapping one finger on the table like he was waiting for a waiter to fix his order. I hadn't seen him in years. The second I walked in, he looked me up and down. "You're late, Mara. Still making everything about you." The relatives along the wall went quiet. I took off my coat slowly and sat across from him. Then Mr. Calder, Vivian's lawyer, reached over and locked the conference room door. That was when my father's smile finally slipped. The room smelled like coffee and old wood. Vivian would have hated it. Staged grief, whispering relatives, men who walked in expecting the room to make space for them. But my father loved rooms like this. He stood near the head of the table beside my mother. Elaine, like Vivian's estate, was some meeting he'd called himself. My cousins wouldn't meet my eyes. An uncle leaned toward his wife and whispered, "I didn't know Mara was coming." Richard heard him and laughed. Of course she came. Vivian always rewarded drama. I kept my hands folded in my lap. Mr. Calder glanced at me, then at a sealed cream envelope in front of him. My name was written across it in dark blue ink. Beside it sat another folder. Ellis, Original Records. My father noticed me staring. "That woman filled your head with poison," he said. "But let's not pretend she was your mother. She was your aunt before she decided to play the replacement." Elaine touched his sleeve. "Richard." "No," he said louder. "Everyone here remembers what happened. Mara was cut off because she made our home impossible. Vivian took her in because Vivian liked rescuing broken things." A few people looked down. I looked at Mr. Calder instead. His face had gone pale. Richard pointed at the documents. "So let's stop wasting time. Family assets stay with family. What did she leave me?" I leaned forward. "You should sit down before you embarrass yourself." His eyes sharpened. "You don't silence me in my own family." "This stopped being your family," I said, "the night you left me on her porch." He took a step toward me. Before he could say more, Mr. Calder stood, turned the lock on the door, and said, "No one leaves until I explain why Mr. Ellis's paperwork can't be real." The sound of that lock threw me straight back to the night I learned what being cut off really meant. I was 14, standing in the rain outside Aunt Vivian's townhouse, one duffel bag at my feet, my backpack digging into my shoulders. My father didn't even get out of the car. My mother stood beside me under a black umbrella, dry and stiff, like she'd been sent to deliver a package. "Mom," I said, gripping the wet strap of my bag, "what did I do?" Elaine wouldn't look at me. "Your aunt wanted responsibility. Now she can have it." From the driver's seat, Richard cracked the window just enough. "You went through things that weren't yours." "It was Grandma's account," I said. "She left it for me." "Why was it empty?" His jaw tightened. "Kids who spy on adults don't get adult protection." Then Vivian's door opened. She stood there in a silk robe, barefoot, hair pinned up messy. She looked from me to my bags to my mother. "Elaine," she said slowly, "why does Mara have all her documents?" My mother's mouth opened, then closed. Vivian stepped into the rain and took my backpack. Inside, my birth certificate, school records, insurance card, a folded bank statement. Everything that proved I belonged somewhere, packed up like evidence. Vivian unfolded the statement under the porch light. Balance: 0. 3 days earlier it had still been my grandmother's savings. My father's car pulled away before Vivian could reach it. That night she made me tea I couldn't drink and put fresh sheets on the guest bed. "You're not leaving this house unless you want to," she said softly. But after midnight, I woke to her voice in the hallway. "Richard, you don't throw away a child because she found a number on a statement." His voice came through the phone, low and sharp. "Stay out of my finances, Vivian, unless you want people looking into yours." The hallway went silent. When she came back into the room, she wasn't angry. She was scared. By morning, she'd enrolled me in a new school and called a family attorney. But I kept thinking about that call. If Vivian was rich, powerful, and fearless everywhere I'd ever seen her, what did my father have on her that made her whisper instead of fight? By the time I turned 18, Vivian had taught me how to stand straight in rooms built to make me shrink. That night, the ballroom of the Whitmore Hotel glittered with chandeliers and donors who smiled at Vivian like she was royalty. I stood beside her holding a clipboard for the spring gala she ran every year. Then my father walked in, uninvited, my mother on his arm. The room quieted table by table. Richard kissed Elaine's cheek for show, then spread his arms. "Vivian, you didn't think we'd miss Mara's big night, did you?" Vivian's fingers tightened around her glass. "You weren't on the list. Family doesn't need one." He turned to the nearest donors, smiling like a proud father. "Mara's recovered well, hasn't she?" Vivian's generosity did wonders. Some teenagers just need firm consequences before they learn gratitude. The words landed in front of everyone. Not abandoned, disciplined. Not discarded, corrected. Every head turned to me. Before I could speak, Vivian walked to the microphone. "Since Richards brought up Mara," she said, voice bright and clean, "I'd like everyone to know she's not only my legal ward, she's my intern, my right hand tonight, and the only honest Ellis I know." A ripple moved through the room. Richard's smile tightened. "And this year, our newest scholarship fund will carry the name of Mara's grandmother, because money meant for a child should never vanish into adult pockets." Elaine's wine glass tipped, red spilling across her sleeve. Richard didn't move for 3 full seconds. Then he clapped. Once. Slowly. "How generous." Later, near the service hallway, I saw him corner Vivian by a stack of empty trays. His voice was low, but I caught enough. "Keep implying theft," he said, "and donors might learn about that loan you signed." Vivian's face went still. "Your signature, my name, bank records, you'll lose everything." I stepped behind the wall before he saw me. That was the first time I understood his grip on her wasn't just shame. It was paperwork. After that night, I stopped waiting for my parents and started saving everything: emails, bank notices, half-finished pages Vivian left on her desk, any sentence that made her shut a folder too fast. When I finally asked what Richard had done, she only said, "Some truths need proof before they become truth." I believed her until the night I found her crying by the fireplace, a stack of old loan notices beside her. She fed the first page into the flames, and before it curled black, I saw my father's signature burning at the bottom. Back in the conference room, Richard's calm was gone. "Unlock that door," he said to Mr. Calder. Now, Calder didn't move. "This is no longer a standard reading. What you submitted this morning creates a legal problem I can't ignore." Richard laughed. "A legal problem? Careful. Accusing me in front of witnesses is slander." Calder opened the folder with both hands. "Vivian's official will was filed with this firm years ago. Witnessed, notarized, on record. Nothing about it is unclear." "Then read it." "I was prepared to," Calder said, "until you showed up with a new codicil this morning." A cousin whispered. "A new what?" "An amendment," Calder said. "This one claims Vivian signed away a large cash distribution to Richard Ellis. and gave him full access to her private archives. My father lifted his chin. She changed her mind. No, I said. Everyone looked at me. I remembered Vivian's last weeks, the hospice room, the nurse logs, the camera above the townhouse door. Her hand shaking so badly I had to hold her water glass. She couldn't sign anything 3 weeks before she died. She was unconscious. Elaine pressed a hand over her mouth. Richard turned on me. You don't know what she did when you weren't there. I was the only visitor allowed. Calder slid the sealed envelope across the table. Mara, this is for you. Inside was a small brass key, a list of account numbers, and one line in Vivian's handwriting. When he comes for the papers, let him ask in front of witnesses. My pulse went cold. I set my phone on the table and hit record. Richard saw the screen light up. You pathetic little girl, he said. She poisoned you against your real family. Elaine reached for me. Mara, stop. Don't destroy your father. I looked at her hand until she pulled it back. He destroyed himself, I said, when he forged a dead woman's signature. Someone gasped. Richard lunged for the folder. Calder's assistant stepped in front of him, holding the documents to her chest. Mr. Ellis, Calder said sharply, I've already contacted the probate clerk. This codicil matches irregularities in older records Vivian kept. My father went white. I lifted the brass key. I know what this opens. Calder led us to the archive room. I unlocked the second cabinet with Vivian's key. Inside were 6 labeled binders, a fireproof pouch, and a letter in her handwriting. Calder pulled on gloves. The first binder read grandmother's original account records. The second, Richard Ellis, loan guarantee. The third, threats and correspondence. Those are private, my father said behind me, breathing too loud. Calder looked at him over his glasses. Not anymore. The truth came out page by page. At 14, I hadn't misunderstood anything. My grandmother had left me a savings account for school and emergencies. Richard drained it to cover payments on a failed business loan. And the loan papers listed Vivian as guarantor, except it wasn't her signature. Calder laid her real signature next to the loan guarantee. The difference was obvious. Wrong shape, wrong spacing, wrong pressure. Richard had forged her name, hidden the theft, and cut me off the moment I got close to finding out. Elaine sank into a chair. No, Richard, tell them that's not true. He said nothing. That silence said everything. Calder read from Vivian's letter. Richard threatened to accuse me of loan fraud if I exposed him without full proof. He also threatened to drag Mara through court as an unstable child. I chose to gather records until the truth could survive him. My throat tightened, but I didn't cry. Vivian hadn't been weak. She'd been building a wall around me out of paper and patience. Calder kept going. Bank statements, copied checks, handwriting reports, nurse logs, and security footage proving Richard hadn't visited Vivian on the date his fake codicil claimed. The forged document hadn't just asked for money. It asked for access to her archive. He hadn't come for an inheritance. He'd come to erase the evidence. I looked at him. For 16 years, he'd lived in my head as a locked door, a raised voice, a man in a driver's seat while I stood in the rain. Now, with every lie spread open in front of him, he looked smaller than I ever imagined. Elaine cried harder. Richard, say something. He looked at the binders, then the lawyer, then me. Nothing. I reached into my purse and slid a brown, sealed page across the table. One loan notice Vivian had burned years ago that I'd saved a copy of. I kept one too. For the first time, my father looked afraid of me. Calder closed the binder. Vivian's valid will leaves Richard and Elaine nothing. Mara inherits the townhouse, Vivian's shares. and full control of the scholarship fund named for her grandmother. The forged codicil goes to probate court, along with everything else. Richard stepped forward. You can't. Security opened the door before he finished. He grabbed for the folder anyway. A guard caught his wrist and pulled him back. Papers scattered across the floor. My cousins watched him like they were seeing him clearly for the first time. By the end of the week, Vivian's statement had reached the relatives who once repeated my father's story. By the end of the month, donors knew the real reason the scholarship existed. His business partners stopped calling him back. The filing opened investigations into forgery, elder financial abuse, and the old loan fraud he'd buried under my childhood. Elaine caught me alone in the hallway after. I was scared, she said, makeup streaked under her eyes. I did what your father told me. Fear explains silence, I said. It doesn't erase 16 years of letting people call me unstable to protect a thief. She reached for my hand. I stepped back. That was the last time either of them got close enough to touch me. Months later, I reopened Vivian's townhouse as the headquarters for my grandmother's scholarship fund. The first award went to a 14-year-old girl leaving an unsafe home, housing, school, counseling, legal help. Vivian taught me that surviving something should come with structure, not just sympathy. I keep her sealed envelope framed behind my desk. Not as a wound, as proof that the truth can wait quietly for years and still show up exactly when it's needed. The night my parents threw me out, they thought they were getting rid of me. 16 years later, I was the one holding the door while the law walked in for them.